Bobby Fischer is widely regarded as one of the greatest chess players of all time, if not the best. And this is his most famous game, dubbed the Game of the Century. He played this when he was only 13 years old against his grandmaster opponent, Donald Byrne. He's with the black pieces, and his opponent starts out with knight f3, knight f6, and we have c4, g6, and Bobby Fischer was a lover of putting his bishop on these long diagonals. He loved fianchetting his bishop like this, pushing a pawn and then fianchetting like this. He absolutely loved it at the time. Knight c3 and bishop g7. We have d4, and if you notice, this looks like a d4 opening, even though it started off as knight f3 with the ready. This is called a transposition. It's kind of like if white played d4 on the first move and then black went to a nimzo and then decided to go for a king's Indian like this, and then white slowly brought up his pieces. It looks pretty similar. It looks really similar. So we have like a very similar position as I just showed you before, and then Bobby castles. So you're wondering why black just allows white to take the entire center. Well, back in the 20th century when this happened, it was said that you could control the center by playing one pawn move like this, which controls e5, a critical square, and a flank square from the center. It was said that you could do this, but modern times you want to play d5, and you want to play for the center here instead of castling and giving white the e4 move. But if you castle and then play e4, d6, this is known as a king's Indian defense. It's pretty normal. But yeah, white plays bishop f4, and then we have d5, a central strike, and now it kind of allows white a big center, but now Bobby himself is striking for the center. We have queen b3, pressuring this b7 pawn, and it kind of makes sure this bishop will never move, because then you'll lose the b7 pawn, obviously. And now it's indirectly pressuring this d5 pawn. We take on c4, and then we play c6, because this pawn was under attack. And you can't really play knight c6, because that would just allow d5, and it's very bad here. But you're probably wondering why white goes for this queen b3 move, because usually bringing out your queen this early in the opening isn't good. Well, it's called a Russian system, although at the time I'm pretty sure it wasn't called a Russian system because it was the Soviet Union, but queen b3 is called the Russian system, and it's basically an opening where you just like to pressure these pawns and you negate this white bishop's development. Basically, it's pretty grandmaster stuff. And then we have c6, e4, and we can see white playing for the center. We have knight bd7. This looks like a weird move because it obviously blocks in your light squared bishop, but Bobby definitely has a plan. I mean, he's probably going to go knight b6 and stuff like this, rook d1, and now rook d1, now this rook may, if this pawn moves or captures anything like this, then this rook may see this queen. And knight b6, attacking the queen, which is probably the idea of knight d7, queen c5, and we have bishop g4. And now we notice these nice bishop over here, and this will play a crucial part in the game. And then we have maybe one of the first mistakes, which I can't really explain, is bishop g5. Bishop g5 is just fundamentally not a good opening, because what you should do is play bishop e2 and get castled. Bishop g5 is kind of a, how do I say it, confrontational approach, I guess. And it's kind of just attacking this knight, but it's not really, because taking this knight is never good. But it allows for a brilliant move, knight a4. Knight a4 just looks like it gives up a clean knight. What does it do? Well, it attacks this knight and queen, and you can't actually take, which is why in the game we had queen a3. If you take, you'll notice that this knight was once defending this e4 pawn, and now you can take on e4. And if the queen moves, we have a nice fork on this queen and bishop. If the queen moves, you're going to take this bishop, and even though it looks like white has gotten 2 pieces for the rook. It's not as it seems because black is dominating here. After kicking out the knight, he'll take on d4, and we're threatening some nasty stuff. And then, so instead in the game, we had queen a3, and then knight takes c3, bc3, and then knight e4. Knight e4, now this attacks this bishop over here. Nice move. But it looks like that black is giving up material because this looks like a fork. Looks like a clean fork. But it's not as it seems because Bobby plays queen b6, and if you take this, then I have bishop f8 attacking the queen. If you move your queen to c1, for example, trying to protect this pawn, this vulnerable pawn here, then knight c3 happens, and you can't take this knight because of this pin with bishop b4, and now this queen is lost. So instead, we had bishop c4. Donald does not want to take any of Bobby's free pieces. Bishop c4, developing another piece, and we have knight c3 anyway. Knight c3 looks weird because now if the queen takes, you don't have a bishop on f8 to go to b4. But if you take, bishop c5 happened in the game because Donald does not want to take any more of Bobby's pieces. After queen c3, this bishop is undefended, and something like rook a8 is super powerful. Because the only move that would protect this bishop is queen back to a3. But you could take this knight on f3, and this queen obviously can't take back because of this. So if you take on f3, then you simply have like bishop f6, for example. That would just attack this pinned bishop. And after something like castles, bishop e7. Black's position is absolutely crushing. The queen is hit. This king is open. And I think this is absolutely lost for white. You cannot do anything. So instead of queen c3, we had bishop c5 attacking the queen. And then we had rook e8 check. We don't move the queen because that would give white too much time to consolidate and use these bishops to his advantage. So Bobby gives an in-between check. But after king f1, Bobby does not move his queen. And it's not a forcing move. It's not a check. It's not anything that you would expect. It's nothing that anyone would expect. He plays the brilliant bishop to e6. This is the most brilliant move of the game for sure, because it looks like it does nothing except threaten this bishop. But the problem is you can't take this bishop because of queen b5 check. And you're going to have to block with the bishop, and then the king has to move here. And this is probably one of the most satisfying checkmates you've ever seen. It's knight e2, knight g3. So we do a ring around a rosy, and the king only move is to go to g1, and we play queen f1, and then knight e2, checkmate, smothered checkmate, because this king has nowhere to move. It's blocked in by all of its allies. So instead of taking the bishop, Robert plays the most reasonable move, the queen. But now Fischer plays bishop takes c4, and the king has to move to f1. Now you might think about taking this rook, you might think about taking this bishop, but Bobby engages in something called the windmill tactic, which is where basically this knight will move, and no matter where it moves, it will be a check, and he can do this for as long as he wants. For example, knight takes d4, king g1, all happen in the game, knight e2 check again, and then knight c3 check. Now this knight is defended by this bishop, so after king g1, you don't take the rook yet, because that would let this bishop get free. You take this bishop first, because now this queen is hit. So the queen has to move. Now b4, now it's like, should Bobby take this? No, because this bishop is being hit, but you don't move this bishop, because then this rook would get away. So you play rook a4. Now you're hitting the queen and protecting the bishop. Now, finally, after queen takes b6, while it attacks nothing, you can finally take on d1. And if we see the material account here, we'll see that there's both sides have a rook, both sides have a knight, but while white does have a queen, it's 2 bishops and a rook for a queen, which is way better. And not to mention that Bobby is up 3 points of material. So Fischer just gobbles up all the pawns, and eventually, after a simplification into an endgame, we have a nice little checkmate. Fischer defending all of his pawns. We have a nice checkmate after knight g3, and now you notice this king is cut off the second rank, and after king e1, bishop b4, we're just leading this king to the corner. Eventually it will get checkmated. King d1, bishop b3, these laser beam bishops covering everything, and this powerful rook on the second rank. Only move is to go king c1, and then we have knight e2, the final dagger, king b1, knight c3, and after king c1, this knight protects these squares, this bishop protects all these squares, this rook protects all these squares. So rook c2 is checkmate in 1. What a phenomenal game.